Today, cover for the 21st century.
95 cents, all this for everybody collect.
The pressure was on for automakers at the turn of the millennium. It was the 2000s. This was supposed to be the future. But lackadaisical design and engineering of the 1980s and 1990s across the industry meant that by the time the 2000s rolled around, catching up to the future became a mad scramble. Why design cars when Y2K was going to happen and all of our toasters were going to come alive and attack us? And for Nissan, they really had more important things to focus on. Yet Nissan was one of the few that didn't seem to be caught off guard by the rolling over of the calendar's odometer. They were cooking. And they made a hit. The 350Z was considered one of the most celebrated and revered sports cars when it entered the market in 2002. It was a return to form. It was the rebirth of the Nissan Z. And yet today, it's been largely sidelined by Z fans. You could say the 350Z Z33 had a hard life. It became the ultimate tuner's dream. Easy to modify, easy to drive, and easy to find. Or at least, it was. As the years pass, it's becoming harder and harder to get a hold of 350Zs, especially unmodified. The Z33 was an icon. No, it is an icon. And the Z34 and RZ34 that have succeeded it owe a lot to their plucky entry-level predecessor. The 350Z was the first modern Z. I'm Rick Pierce, a history nerd that loves cars and wants to share some car history nerdery. Today, let's dive into the history and development of the Nissan 350Z and find out just what makes it such an important part of the Z car lineup. Welcome to Make and Model. While the last Z cars bound for North America rolled off assembly lines in 1996, and with the model's future uncertain, a businessman named Carlos Ghosn was being recognized for his radical restructuring efforts at Renault's South American division. That restructuring, which were largely cost-cutting measures, plus his work as an executive vice president at Renault, where he oversaw purchasing, research, and manufacturing, led the company to profitability and resulted in Ghosn being named CEO of Renault in 1997. As CEO of Renault, Ghosn did what he did best, implemented more cost-cutting measures. But it worked, and Renault continued to have profitable quarters. The board was happy, the shareholders were happy, and Ghosn was happy. The laid-off workers, maybe not them so much. Nissan, on the other hand, was struggling. Even with the few internal projects kicking around, R&D had slowed, and profitability didn't seem like something Nissan could maintain. Ghosn noticed, and he decided to do something about it. Nissan was under a lot of pressure from the Japanese government to find a business partner and keep the company afloat. The name Nissan was too big to fail. When Renault came knocking with a plan that would let Nissan save face and keep its name, it was quickly accepted. It was seen as a desperate move at the time, and one that feels strangely familiar today. In March 1999, Nissan merged with Renault, and the Renault-Nissan alliance was formed. It didn't take long for Ghosn's interest in Nissan to formalize. In June of that year, he made himself Nissan's COO, and he got to work. First things first, he developed what he called the Nissan Revival Plan, which outlined a path to profitability by 2000, a profit margin in excess of 4.5% of sales, and a 50% reduction in debt by the end of 2002. To show the company he was serious, he promised to resign if his goals weren't met. As COO of Nissan, Ghosn did what he did best: implemented cost-cutting measures. Did you think I was going to say something different? He immediately slashed 21,000 jobs and shut 5 manufacturing plants in Japan. He dismantled Nissan's long-held banking, manufacturing, distribution, and supply chain systems. and installed North American and European executives in long Japanese-held positions, and changed the official company language to English. And he ended lifetime employment guarantees and age-based promotion. He made waves and enemies, but also profits. Prior to anything to do with Ghosn, Nissan leadership had a dilemma with what to do about the Z car. The Z was a legendary brand and one of their most successful models. They couldn't just not have a Z. So while the model had ended in North America, it continued quietly in Japan while Nissan figured out what their plans were for a successor. To keep interest alive, they began two initiatives. First, they would develop a new concept. And second, they'd create a program to restore and sell classic Zs. Both initiatives would put the 240Z back into public consciousness. Nissan's Vintage Z program coordinated special dealerships in the US, called Z stores, to work with buying back original 1970 and 1971 240Zs and have them professionally restored. All in all, despite demand from excited customers, only 40 cars were restored, and they retailed between $25,000 and $27,500, or around $52,000 today. While that price point cooled some buyers' enthusiasm, they were still being sold at a loss for Nissan. But that wasn't the point. Nissan saw this as a stopgap measure as it worked to get a new Z to market. Manny Baker was the designer who worked for Nissan Design America, or NDA, formerly NDI, in San Diego, California. In late 1998, he was assigned the task of coming up with a sketch for a new 240Z. His concept was a retro-futuristic tribute to the original 240Z, with sweeping lines and minimalist design. Nissan leadership, at this point now heavily involved with the upcoming Renault merger and under pressure to produce something, anything, approved the design. They gave NDA 12 weeks to turn it into a prototype they could show off at the North American International Auto Show. And somehow, NDA managed to do it. Debuting on January 8, 1999, the Nissan 240Z prototype wowed attendees with a preview of what the future held for the Z brand. Under the hood was a 200 horsepower KA24DE inline 4, the same used in the Altima, whose 2.4-liter displacement gave the 240Z its name. Critics weren't very impressed with its performance stats, however. Despite that, what people did like was the color. The burnt orange metallic was called Le Mans Sunset. With the 240Z prototype a hit, and Nissan now starting to financially recover, with Ghosn at the helm of operations by this point, the prototype gets the green light for development. Ghosn describes the future Z as an important means for Nissan's recovery, recognizing the value of the Z brand as a sports car icon. It helps that Nissan is flush with cash at this point, Ghosn now hailed as the hero that saved Nissan. When he took over, critics speculated Ghosn was chosen to be a scapegoat that would end Nissan mercifully. Those critics were wrong. He would do it unmercifully. With the next Z approved, Nissan product chief designer Mamoru Aoki decides to keep the design team at NDA working on the project. He assigns Diane Allen, NDA chief designer, to oversee the creation of the Z33. This is exciting for NDA, who had been creating Z-car concept sketches for years but never being put in charge of the production vehicle. With the deep history of the Z in America, and its quiet end just a few years earlier, NDA wanted to make sure they did the job right. Designer AJ Panchel was given the task. The 240Z concept prototype was just the beginning. Panchal was committed to solving the subtleties and nuances of sports car design for a 21st century audience. This meant sharp lines and angles, but it also meant retaining organic shapes and smooth flowing lines. The design drew on past styling cues, with small nods to the Zs that came before it. Developed alongside the Z33 styling was its engineering. Tossing out the largely underpowered 2.4-liter engine freed up new possible powertrains. But it also meant a name change would be in order. Ultimately, the team decided to keep it a V6 like the Z32 and Z31 that came before. And unlike the Z32 that couldn't wait for the VQ engine to finish its own engineering development before it had to hit the market, the VQ was now ready. And most importantly, with a 3.5-liter displacement, it fit. That meant the Z33 had a name, the 350Z. Its platform would be all new as well. Called the FM platform, FM standing for front midship, it was developed to be as centrally weighted as possible, pushing the engine as far back as it could and the center of mass located just behind the front axle. Hence the name midship. The FM platform has gone on to become one of Nissan's most successful platforms. And its first use actually beat the 350Z to market when it debuted in the 2002 Infiniti G35. But it's been used in the Nissan Skyline, the Q60, the QX50, the later 370Z, and it's still being used in the current Nissan Z. The design and engineering team began with a goal: shake off the luxury of the previous CX and its name, make it more nimble, increase its power, and get back to the roots of the 240Z for the new millennium. In this, Nissan succeeded. The car was previewed ahead of launch in the summer of 2002, being showcased at Daytona Blue and, of course, Le Mans Sunset. And it met the press's expectations, as they were all too eager to share. But before we get into that, let's take a closer look at the model features and differences in the breakdown.
Hey, the breakdown!
The fifth generation of the Nissan Z car, the 350Z, is a front-engine, rear-wheel drive FR sports car, also known by its model code Z33, that was sold between the 2003 and 2009 model years. Like its Z32 predecessor, it came in two body styles, a 2+0 two-seat coupe and a 2+0 two-seat convertible. But unlike its predecessors, it was never offered as a 2+2 four-seater. It weighed approximately 3,300 pounds and had a well-balanced 53 front, 47 rear weight distribution ratio. Under the hood was the VQ35DE, a naturally aspirated 3.5-liter V6 that produced 287 horsepower and 274 pound-feet of torque. Later, the VQ35HR 3.5-liter V6 was introduced, the HR standing for high revolution. It produced 306 horsepower and 268 pound-feet of torque. The quickest way to identify a 350Z is by its rear quarter windows, which slope downward and are flat across the bottom. These are vaguely reminiscent of the Z32 rear quarter windows, but have a decidedly sharper angle and are smaller. Additionally, look for the large vertical headlights and vertical reflectors paired with the low rectangular grille in the front, and the sharp triangular taillights that rise up and along the lines of the rear fender. A smaller detail is the vertical door handles in brushed aluminum. These are cool. Inside, the 3 center pod gauges have returned to the Z, paired with 3 new pod-style dashboard gauges that are mounted to the steering column and move when the wheel is tilted. The rear strut towers are connected by a rear sway bar housing. And there's no glove box. Instead, there's a small storage compartment behind each seat. The 2003 model, the first model year, was made available for purchase on August 20th, 2002, and only came as a coupe. The 350Z Roadster, a convertible, was added a year later as a 2004 model. It featured an electronically retractable soft-top roof. The 35th Anniversary Edition was launched as a special edition in 2005 to commemorate the 35th anniversary of the original 240Z. 35th Anniversary Editions, sometimes referred to as 35AEs, featured an upgraded 300 horsepower rev-up engine for manuals, new 18-inch wheels, a front spoiler, and Brembo brakes. Approximately 2,000 were made. In 2006, the Z33 received a facelift, changing the front fascia and adding new bi-xenon headlights and LED taillights. The interior trim was also changed in response to complaints, with new tech features like an MP3 CD player and satellite radio offered. But, like the Z31 that came before, the facelift was quickly facelifted again the following year. Just a little. In 2007, the hood was raised to accommodate the new VQ35HR engine, giving the car a slightly more aggressive look to go with its new beefier power plant. A Nismo edition of the 350Z was also introduced that added a sportier aero package in addition to Nismo-branded raised wheels, an upgraded suspension, stitch welding to reduce flex, red accents inside, and a branded exhaust. Between 2007 and 2008, 1,611 Nismo 350Zs were produced. Lastly, only the Roadster was sold in 2009, and it was sold alongside the new 370Z. As you can imagine, there weren't many sales, and 2009 350Zs are fairly rare. In preparation for the 350Z's release, Nissan put together a short film called The Run, showcasing a 350Z racing through the streets of Prague as fast as it could go, taking tight turns and cutting through traffic. It was all staged, of course, and the editing took its cues from early 2000s action flicks. But the film really highlighted the Z33's capability, and it started drumming up excitement for its release. The media was next to get its hands on the car, releasing real-world driving data and critical previews of the new Z. But the reception was anything but critical, and the Z33 hit showroom floors largely praised. Who cared about cheap plastics in the interior when the car was fun as hell to drive? The Z was back. Eddie Alterman, chief editor of Automobile magazine, said they got all the important stuff right. Automobile magazine would later name the 350Z its 2003 Automobile of the Year. Car and Driver included it on their 10 best list for 2003. Edmunds.com named it their most significant vehicle of the year. In North America, over 40,000 units were sold the first year, a sales figure the Z car hadn't reached since the 1990 300ZX. And instead of a sharp decline, as typical with sports cars, the 350Z would do almost as well its second year on the market. Yeah, the Z was definitely back. In 2001, Carlos Ghosn was promoted to CEO of Nissan, effectively cementing his control of the Renault-Nissan alliance and acting as chief executive officer for both companies. It was the first time Nissan had ever had a foreign CEO, causing some bristling among critics that resulted in reassurances from those that knew Ghosn. With the successful launch of the Z33, any further criticism was silenced. Ghosn had been given a nearly concrete mandate. And that mandate had a name: Nissan 180. Ghosn had come up with Nissan 180 a few months before the 350Z's launch. The 180 in the plan's name wasn't just wordplay to turn Nissan around. First, by 2005, Nissan would increase its global sales to 1 million vehicles. Second, Ghosn committed the company to an operating margin of 8% by that same year. And third, Nissan would have a net debt of 0. All of these goals were met, and ahead of schedule. By 2005, Nissan was a profitable company, selling more than 3.5 million vehicles and operating in the black. In 2006, Ford extended an offer to Ghosn to leave Nissan and take over Ford because Ford was going through its own hard times. Ghosn refused the offer, stating that he would only leave Nissan if Ford not only made him CEO, but also made him chairman of the board. Bill Ford Jr. refused to give up his position on the board. That was probably a good decision. It's kind of a weird time to be a 350Z fan. The car exists today in this nebulous place where it's slowly being forgotten as an automotive darling that maybe saved Nissan and brought back the Z. We owe a lot to the designers, engineers, and executives that recognized the value of the Z brand and fought for it in the years it seemed like the Z car didn't make much sense to produce. That said, the 350Z is deep into what I call the 20-year low, when a vehicle is its least desirable because it has outdated tech, its styling is seen as antiquated, and it hasn't quite picked up that cool vintage charm yet. And that's not a hard and fast rule of cars, just something I've observed in life. Lots of cars never even experience it. Some hit it early. But the 20-year low gives way to the 30-year high. And that's in the 350Z's future too. The real trick for those collectors a decade from now will be actually finding 350Zs to buy, since so many are no longer on the road. The 350Z became the ultimate boy racer toy because it could be modded into almost any setup a person wanted, and on the cheap. Tuners, drifters, racers, hooners, it's like naming off high school cliques. And at the center of it all is a 350Z with a primered wing and 3 different sets of wheels. The 350Z has had a hard life because it was so successful. Where actual racing teams used the Z33 to great success in the SCCA, NASA, and Grand Am, the vehicle's price meant there was no barrier to entry, and it was used by semi-professional and amateur teams just as often, maybe more so. For many, it's the perfect platform. The ultimate 2000s street machine as evidenced by the cover cars of Forza Motorsport 2 and Need for Speed Underground 2, and not to mention the Veilside beast that appeared in Tokyo Drift. The 350Z is one of the most prolific Hot Wheels ever cast. But it being tossable means that many were just tossed out, disregarded as sacrificial fodder to the car gods. And that's a shame, especially as we're on the verge of the 350Z becoming a new classic. The Z33 may be working toward becoming a classic, but its successor is still riding a wave of relevancy and popularity rarely seen in sports cars. That successor didn't just see the tail end of the 2000s when it replaced the 350Z in 2008. It saw the entirety of the 2010s, the downfall of Carlos Ghosn, and the beginning of the 2020s. It is one of Nissan's most well-known and beloved models, even among Zs. I am, of course, referring to the Z34, the 370Z. What's up, everyone? Thanks for joining me for part 7 of the Nissan Z-Car series. I was exactly the right age to be won over by Nissan marketing when the 350Z came out, 18 years old, and won over I was. It's always been one of my favorite Zs as a result. If there's a car you think I should cover in a future video, let me know in the comments below. As always, hitting subscribe would be greatly appreciated. That way you'll see when I release my next video, and hitting the bell will let you know as soon as it's released. Many thanks to my Patreon patrons and channel members whose names you see on the screen. They support me working toward doing this full time, and I really just can't say thanks enough for that. If you'd like to support the channel but can't donate, Patreon has a free tier that you can sign up for, and then you'll be included in the credits too. If you become a paid patron, you'll get one of these cool stickers. Those are just for the first 100 patrons, and then they'll be gone forever. I stuck mine to the back of my new project car, a 1987 Honda Wagavan. Check out my Instagram at itsrickpierce to see my progress on that. You've made it to the end of the video. Let me know you were here by throwing a Shoshinsha mark in the comments to really confuse the people that didn't make it this far, and to help with engagement. A Shoshinsha mark to represent all the 350Z boy racers that drifted their tail end into a wall and broke the frame. Also, in case you haven't noticed, I just really like yellow and green. Thanks for watching. Until next time.
The f are you doing?